Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Peacock, a fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy, ordained queerdo with a fascination for all things cycles, symbolism, and patterns.
And I'm Moonkittee, your queer femme, poly kitchen witch, and proud geek. Today's topic is Queer Tarot Revisited, Part 2 of the Major Arcana. Woohoo! So last
Yay!
episode we did the part 1. So we talked about what it is, the Major Arcana, and a quick refresher for us, or at least for me, the Major Arcana tends to revolve around major life events. And it's aspects of humanity and cycles that we all kind of go through as we are going through life in different stages.
All right, and we went through the cycle 0 to 10 in our part 1. So hopefully if you missed that, you can go back and find that in our list of episodes. So you can get all caught up to where we're going to start now today, because we're going through each card, kind of giving a lens of what our interpretations of each card are, or our personal experiences with them, and also how we see it through the lens of being, a queer practitioner,
Hmm.
and how that kind of pertains to living that life as, one of under the alphabet soup umbrellas. Let's
Hmm.
put it that way.
Exactly. So last time we talked about the fool through the wheel of time. So today we're jumping out of the wheel and that constant motion of change and straight into justice.
Number 11, my favorite number.
Hmm.
I think it's really interesting. One of my favorite decks, sometimes you'll find that decks, there'll be personal interpretations, and so
Hmm.
often 11 and 8 will get swapped. So sometimes you'll find strength in the position of 11 and justice in the position of 8. But traditionally, I'm used to mostly seeing justice as 11. And I think of that as the scales of
Hmm.
justice, just like within the Libra, that duality in the manifest in the number 11
Hmm.
itself. Of the 11 in numerology is a 2 technically, but it's made up of its 2 separate 1 components. So I often see that as 1 being kind of like leadership that doesn't lose its power to meeting an equal.
Hmm.
So it's about being able to work with other people. And I think that justice is kind of an important and big and broad concept in and of itself.
Hmm.
And so often, what is justice? It's not necessarily to the letter of the human law, because sometimes the human law itself is flawed and
Hmm.
needs to be revised and fixed, and is constantly going through processes of being proven or
Hmm.
disproven, ethical or unethical, constitutional or non-constitutional. So I feel like all of these things, when it comes to law, is highlighted by the archetype of the justice card.
Hmm.
What else do you think of when you're reading with the justice card?
When I'm reading the justice, I tend to look at things like we said in cycles and patterns, in the sense that we have the first half of the major arcana, and we've got to a point where things are changing, and when we're cycling back around, because again things flow in cycles. To me, the justice card mirrors that magician card. It is now, but it mirrors it and expands it. It takes it to the next level. So now in the beginning, when we were magician learning about ourselves and what we can do and how we can do it, now we're taking it to ourselves. How can we do, and how can we impart this on the world itself? How can we take the lessons we've learned, and we how can we take the lessons we learned and put it to a greater good? Take that sense of justice, of the injustices we've learned, we've watched, we've seen come through. How can we now correct those and take it from inside yourself to taking it outside of yourself? So there's a lot of things that are similar to it, but like you said, this is about acknowledging the imbalances. And whatever that imbalance may be, whether it's in the current political climate or whether it's in a relationship, because you can absolutely have justice imbalances in relationships that come through and need to be addressed, depending on how you're
Mm-hmm.
looking at it, if it comes into, say, a love reading. But it's really about how that mimics and mirrors and puts it on the next level. Okay, now you've learned this lesson about yourself. Now it's time to take that lesson you've learned and take it outside yourself and put it forth into the world.
And I've talked about in the previous episode about how there's a lot of dichotomies or
Hmm.
dualities in tarot. And so the scales of justice is another one of those, dualities that we're pointing out because the thing is one day, like we learned with the Wheel of Fortune, how things will always change. Well,
Hmm.
one day you could be the authority on justice. You could be the cop or the lawyer or the judge. And then the next day you can be the criminal. And
Hmm.
things can change. There are a lot of people who are seen as the good guy that are actually doing criminal things. And there's a
Hmm.
lot of people who are labeled criminals that are working towards social justice. And, so don't read a book by its cover always, be
The Robin
careful.
Hood effect.
Right. So it goes, when this card comes up, it's one of those major intellectual exercises to really ask yourself, what is just? What is a balance? What is equality? What is equanimity? What is social justice?
Hmm.
These are important intellectual thought experiments that we as humans dive into because we're trying to build a world where we can all live
Hmm.
together.
And there's a lot of heaviness to this card, but there's also a little bit of lightheartedness in the sense that I see with the justice is, and this is going to be a millennial thing. I apologize to Gen Z and below if you're coming across this later, but there was a Gen X millennial kind of thing that we've heard of as the adultier adult. This to me in a lot of ways is the idea of the justice card because you're coming out of this first second of this first life path of all these changes spitting out from the wheel of change, and now suddenly you realize you are the adultier adult. You have to
Yeah,
look back and go, oh crap, I'm looking around for an adult. Wait a minute, I'm the
it's
adult.
me.
Shit, what do I
I'm
got
the
to do now?
adult. Yeah,
There's a lot of the justice card in that kind of aspect that
yeah.
again now you've got to take it outside and do something with it.
Yeah. And truthfully, when I was taught that when the justice card comes up in a reading, ask somebody if they're going through any legal matters, because sometimes it
Hmm.
could be a sign that it's going to be wrapping up, hopefully in your
Hmm.
favor, but one way or another it wraps up. And that's the other thing about justice is it's neither good nor bad. It
Hmm.
is what it is.
Right.
It's not quantifiable. It's so yeah, what really is just? What is justice? It's big things that we need to be asking ourselves these in this current climates.
Right. And then you go from the justice card to
12, which
the
is
hanged man.
oh
So now you've learned this lesson. You've seen justice and you've realized, oh crap, I've got to do something for the greater good. Now the hangman comes around and says, take what you've learned and turn it on its head. And for me, when I read this card, again, as I'm talking about how it mirrors the first half of the Arcana, I tend to see this both as mirroring the High Priestess, but also a little bit of the Hermit. So
hmm
it's not a 1-to-1 ratio this time around. Now you're taking all the lessons that you learned at different points and kind of blending them together. So now you're taking that
hmm
perspective that you've learned. And the idea of the hangman is you're on the tree, you're sitting there, and now you're look at the world through different eyes. And it's really about seeing things anew from that different perspective, but also a little bit about caution to not wait because there's an aspect of the hangman that I tend to get, and I've gotten through most of the readings in that cycle. And what I was taught is you can hang around, but at some point in time, you still got to do something. You can sit there and hang around and stare and look. Oh, the world is on fire. This is what I see. But if you're not going to do anything about it, then you're not actually going into. You're not progressing.
Well, I think that's interesting because a lot of people will feel like who are feeling stuck will have the hanged man card coming up a lot. But the justice moving, from justice to the hangman, justice card is very much about what's going on in community and society in out in the world. And once again, the hangman is coming back to yourself and, well, what do I think about this? Does this
Hmm.
align with my values? But also, I think the other side of that is the hanged man is telling you to wait, to pause, to take a moment. If you're trying to like push things through and you're not getting anywhere and you are stuck, the hanged man's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Sometimes you have to sacrifice something to get further ahead. So what is it that, are you willing to give up this forward momentum for a minute to think about what your next step is?
Hmm.
How much thought have you put into what's about to come next? So the hanged man, I think, represents a pause,
Hmm.
which can also be looking at that you need to move on and move
Hmm.
forward. But don't forget the like with the hermit, like you were saying, it kind of reflects the hermit. It's one of those cards that says pause and go internal
Hmm.
before you proceed. And the one of my mythological equivalents to the hanged man that I love is within Norse mythology, the idea that Odin hung himself on the world tree um, for the knowledge of the runes. So Odin, I didn't he give up an eye or something too at some point? So like,
Norse mythology is not my strong point. I know that
yep,
he lost. I don't know if it's relating to that particular aspect of the
yep.
story. So I do not know.
I just know that in order to gain the plan of moving forward, you have to give up something. And that's, I feel like the hanged man also represents that kind of, not necessarily martyrdom, but self-sacrifice of what
Hmm.
you're willing to let go of in order to realign and gain a new plan for moving forward.
Hmm. I think that we're talking two sides of the same coin for this
Of
interpretation.
course.
Because, like I said, there's definitely the need for pause and reflection and seeing things from that different lens and realizing where you're going. But again, like the hermit has to come out to the wheel and things
Yep.
progress. Eventually you gotta shit or get off the pot. And
Yep.
yes, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to shit. Pardon the phrasing, but sometimes you're in there for a while, but you still gotta do it eventually and then get out.
Yep. Well, and then from there, you move on to not the most delightful card,
Right. This is the one that scares
but
people. You
also
move
not
it.
the worst one.
No, but it falls into
Not
it's what we're talking about is number 13,
the
death.
13, which is death. And a lot of people want to interpret that literally, and it's
Yes.
very important that we stress that it is not always meant that there will be a literal death. You are
Hmm.
not dying today, sorry about it.
Yeah.
Back it up. And it's not predicting your death or your demise. It's not
Mm-mm.
predicting that your loved one's going to die. But what death symbolizes is that all things must come to an end, and that every ending comes with some every new beginning comes from some other
So there's
beginning's
beginnings
end.
end. Yeah.
I can't help it with the song quotes. Sorry. At
Yes,
least
I
I
get
didn't
it.
sing it. At least I didn't sing it. But here's the thing about death, y'all. There is no life without death.
Hmm.
When we talk about there being so many dualities within the tarot, life and death are one of the major ones. And we all experience death in our life. And I'm not talking about the death of a loved one, though, yes, there is no
Hmm.
way that anybody's going to get through this life without experiencing something like that. But it's the ego deaths. It's the death of, I thought this was going to be my career, but I lost my passion for it, and now I want to do this.
Hmm.
It's the death of, letting go of an idea or a love or a passion or a path forward and allowing for change and transformation.
Hmm.
And what are your feels when the death card comes up?
Same. I tend to mirror this one to the Empress, with Empress breeding creation and Mother Earth. Death breeds creation.
Hmm.
So you have the cycle of life. One thing leads into the other. Something has to die, like you said, for something else to begin, and something has to end for something new to begin. And that's the idea of death and transformation. It's the butterfly. It's the moving from one cycle to the next. But to me, compared to, say, another card that we'll discuss a little bit later, this is a little bit gentler
Hmm.
in the idea of change and creation.
Actually, death can become your buddy, like thinking of him as like the Grim Reaper with the scythe. that takes
Hmm.
down the harvest. You know, death is present in the life cycles of the
Hmm.
seasons, of the way the world turns. Death can be your buddy because we cannot forever be this one thing always and forever. We go through our own cycles.
Hmm.
So death can come in and help you digest, break down, let go of old patterns, things that aren't helping you
Hmm.
anymore, things that you trauma that you need to let go of. Death can be your buddy, because it'll break it down and take it. And I think of mushrooms and, you
Hmm.
know, the cycle of Persephone becoming, you
Hmm.
know, the queen of the underworld and embracing that life for half of the
Hmm.
year. You know, death, is not an adversary.
Right. And it can be a little things. Like I said, I love the idea of that aspect of Persephone as death. But also just that to walk a new path, you have to leave your old path behind. And
Yeah.
whether that's walking into that stepping into your authenticity thing again, like I tend to say quite often, is to do so. You have to leave who you were trying to be behind to become who you are going to be.
Or even like you were saying, realizing that you are the adultliest adult in the
Yeah,
room. You have
exactly.
to allow for the childhood patterns to die.
Hmm. And you can
And
acknowledge whether they served or didn't serve you, but you have to let them go.
yep,
And that death cycle is about letting go.
yep.
So it's to me, I don't fear this card, and when it comes up to people, it's like you said, the first thing you say, this is not literal death. This is not talking about someone dying. Because again, I'm not going to predict that 2 weeks from now you're going to be hit by a red truck walking down the street. That's that's not the way this kind of works. But no, it means that something new is coming, and for that
Yeah.
something new to come, something old needs to go.
And just like the lesson of what are you willing to sacrifice,
Hmm.
this one, the death card comes in and says, what are you willing to let go of
Hmm.
in order to progress on your journey?
Right.
And remember, you're the fool encountering death, but you are also death
Hmm.
that can tell the fool what needs to be let go of. Here,
Right.
just give that to me. Give that to me. I will take that for you. And now you can continue on with your journey,
Hmm.
maybe slightly less burdened.
Hmm. And from death comes something different because you come out of it into something new, and that is 14, temperance.
A very important lesson.
And a little bit strange because you think of death as coming out of this natural big transition into something new. It's like, okay, this is what's going on. But oftentimes when you're coming out of a transition, you're suddenly realizing, okay, I'm not sure, you're unsure. And you tend to feel safer taking baby steps coming out of a big transition. And that's where temperance comes in. And to me, this again mirrors the emperor card in this sense that now we know the rules. We know what's going to happen. We know what we're supposed to do. At least we have good guidelines at this point in time. We've learned so much. We have rules. And now we start to understand why and what the consequences of what happens when those rules aren't respected, and sometimes accept why rules are necessary. And temperance is about that moderation and finding that kind of midpoint. I don't want to say balance because it's
Mhm.
not really about balance the way some of the other cards are, but it's about finding that kind of moderate way through some of the challenges. So your emotions aren't at a high or a low, it's steady. That comes through for me for the temperance card.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting that we started this episode on the 11
Mm-hmm.
justice, which is about balance. And, you know, again, I'm going to be constantly bringing up the dualities,
Mm-hmm. Right.
because we live within a spectrum. So we have to
Mm-hmm.
understand these dualities exist so that we can highlight the center. And what better way to do that than temperance? I love to think about how you temper metal to make it stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you do that, like if you're making a sword or whatever, is you're exposing it to extreme heats and then extreme cooling down. And you're going to temper it, making it stronger by going through these two extremes. And if anybody who's experienced or has loved ones who've experienced, you know, the struggles of bipolar, where you can either be super depressed or super manic,
Hmm.
you have a unique appreciation for the idea of temperance because the happy middle, the squishy middle, the
Hmm.
good, the place where you can function is not in either extreme, but in the balance between the two, in the center between the two. So I always think about temperance again with those dualities in the tarot and finding the center of those two. So
Hmm.
look, life is not all fun and games. Okay.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have to get serious. Sometimes we do have to do the adult thing. And sometimes we have to say no to things that we know are not good for us.
Hmm.
However, life is not just work, 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 and no play either. And
Hmm.
we have to find the fun in it. We have to be able to indulge and have some fun and
Hmm.
have pleasure and joy and, all of these things that make life worth living. We have to have a beautiful balance of the two, and we can't get lost on either side of that duality. So I
Hmm.
think temperance is a very important, very powerful message and a very powerful energy for you to awaken into your life.
Hmm. I agree. Moderation and everything, including moderation.
Moderation in everything, including moderation. I love that.
Right. Because again, sometimes you, like you said, you need the highs. You need the really
Yeah.
fun experiences and you need the really sometimes low experiences to understand where the middle is.
I need to sometimes have something to look forward to.
Hmm. And sometimes you
But
just need to let go and be silly or weird
yeah,
or out there or
not taking life too
not
seriously.
taking life too serious or find an energetic vibration that suits you, whether it's through dance or other things or whatever it may be, finding some sort of connection that's beyond you, that's just a soul connecting kind of motion or moment. And then sometimes you need to be fully grounded in the world that's around you too. So finding the balance, but also understanding that you can't always walk the center of the road. Sometimes you're going to have to walk either side of it.
But should you perhaps not fully understand temperance and need something to come into your life that makes you appreciate temperance more?
Hmm.
That's where we meet our next character on the road.
Yes, and that
So
would
we move
be
from 14 to 15,
yes. And here's
and
where
we
we
meet.
encounter the devil. Ha!
And
So this
yeah, he's about the extremes, to be honest. Yeah, if you don't learn that temperance lesson, the devil will come right on in here and be like, well, maybe it is all about pleasure.
right,
Maybe it's all about indulgence.
and this is where one of those things again, oftentimes, um, to quote one of my favorite movies, "There's no devil in the craft," right? But yet we still see a devil card in tarot.
Well, I
Now,
don't
part of that
believe
goes back
in.
to RWS and Christian iconography, which again, way back in our first episode, but also the idea of the devil is that embodiment of what temptation is.
Mm,
And
mm.
ultimately, to me, that's what he is. So if the Hierophant is seeking a spiritual connection on a purer level, the devil is that flip side of it, of
Pure
temptation and
pleasure,
addiction.
pure temptation. Yeah, and absolutely can be addiction. And I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea of a devil in the Christian mythology kind of way,
Hmm.
but that in that as an idea, it exists because we
Exactly.
talk about him.
Hmm.
We've created what the devil is because he's an idea and an archetype.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, he is definitely the one that wants you to indulge in the temptations.
Hmm.
And this is a lesson in, sometimes we have to get lost in order to
Hmm.
get found. Anybody who have come out of addiction has very much experienced that finding themselves again
Hmm.
after getting lost, losing who they are to something becoming more important than the journey, than the life, than the purpose that we are born with. Something becomes somehow more important to us, and we lose our own personal power to whatever this is that we've given it
Hmm.
to that has become more important, whether it's whatever the chains are that bind us to, this part of the path.
Hmm.
But the thing is, the chains, the addictions, these are things that we've done to ourselves. And if we've done this to ourselves, guess what? We can undo it too.
Hmm.
We can reclaim our personal power back from the devil. We can say no to the addictions. We can, learn that lesson of temperance. So I think sometimes it is important that we maybe, follow the little devil on our shoulder, and do the mischievous things, or the indulgence things. I know that I drank more wine last night than I should have on a night before I should be that I'm planning to be podcasting. So I mean, it was a morning, let's just say.
Hmm.
But I think that that also is just another part of life. There's nothing wrong with it. We shouldn't feel ashamed of it. Sometimes we kind of need those moments where we do lose ourselves to something else, because how are we going to know what is for us if we don't experience what is not for us?
And from a queer perspective, I also have a slightly different nuanced meaning for this in the sense that from a queer lens, the devil can also be our toxic relationships.
Mm,
Whether that is a romantic relationship or a familial relationship. But the devil can also represent that in the sense that a lot of our toxic relationships, sometimes we stay in them because it feels safe when we know it's not. Like you said earlier, we bind ourselves with those chains.
yeah,
And whether it's
I
the
did it to
fear of,
myself.
yeah, well, sometimes families again put structures on that put them there, but at some point in time you have the ability to break free from them. And sometimes it takes people longer than others because there is a sense of security in knowing what you know. And the
Yeah,
unknown is scary. So again, there is that aspect of the devil too. So you have the ability to break your bonds, but it's going to require something.
yeah.
Something's going to have to change. Something's going to have to be different for you to break those bonds, which then leads us
I was
to
gonna
number
say, well, let's
16.
say, let's say that you don't. Okay. Let's say that you didn't learn much from temperance, and you're not learning a whole lot with Mr. Devil over here either, and something's gotta change, and you're not doing it. So
Hmm.
what happens?
Sometimes, again, then you reach to the tower.
The, the tower, number 16.
Number 16. Now,
You
this is
have built your world on a pile of lies,
mhm,
and it all will start crumbling down.
exactly. This is the card. If you're going to be scared of any card initially in the major arcana, this is the one that should truly, well, I wouldn't say should truly terrify you, because honestly, this card doesn't terrify me in the sense, but when you're first looking at coming through, this is the card that will shake you. Far more
I
than
will,
the devil, far more than
yeah,
death. This is
death,
the
yep.
card. If you don't understand the tarot, this is the card that will shake you.
Well, I mean, I do understand the tarot, and anytime the tower comes up, I just go, oh, this is serious.
Hmm.
You got to look at this. This is
Yeah.
something you got to look at, because this is here. This is literally the thing that the tower represents, is that that change is happening, and you have no control over it.
And not just
You,
change, but catastrophic change. This is big change. This is not, oh, I'm deciding I'm going to start a new career. This is suddenly you are being forced to move across the country and start a new life. This is catastrophic, major change. Swift and sudden, everything comes crashing down from where you thought you were.
But like one of the big lessons from the tower is that, and we're going to take this back to the fool's journey.
Hmm.
He's on this journey, and he meets all these people. He meets this magician, this high priestess, this emperor, empress, the hierophant, the lovers, the chariot driver, the woman taming her strong ass lion, the hermit up in the mountains, justice. Like, we're meeting all of these archetypes, and they're like adding this brick by brick, building this tower up about who you are and what your purpose is and what you think your experience and what life really is, and all of these ideas of who you think you might be. And it's all ego. It's
Hmm.
all a sense of like this idea of what other people are telling you that you need to be and what you need to do. And sometimes you have to let that fall. You have to let that crash down. You have to, I thought who I was about all about being a caregiver and a mother and a structure builder and seeking a sense of somebody who fights for justice. And I thought that is who I was. But ultimately, that's just what I do. It's not who I am. And
Hmm.
you have to let these ideas that you hold about yourself not be defining you because you are so much more than what you think you are.
Hmm.
And sometimes far less, depending on what your perspective is.
Ultimately, it really comes down to it makes you have to, like you said, think about who you are. But what was the circumstances that put you where you're at to this point of change? And realizing that what you thought is not serving you. It's not
Yeah.
serving you in the right way to let you progress forward. It's not serving you in the ways that you need that support. And it's about finding from that tower that's now crashed down, finding the other
Humility.
bits and pieces, finding the truth
Yep.
in that rubble. And
And, just allowing for, again, another cycle of just letting things go
mhm,
and humbling yourself into this mystery called life. Because once you think you've got it mastered, it's going to throw something else at you.
mhm,
And that's part of the cycle.
yes. And like I said, having gone through multiple different tarot points or tower points in my life, I don't fear it anymore. I think that's just, again, like you said, getting older, wiser as I'm learning. I see it as like, okay, to me, it's a brace for impact when this comes up in one of my readings. So that means, okay, things are going to be shifting, things are going to be changing. What are my new lessons to learn out
Or
of it?
even like
But
somebody will come to me for a reading when they're in the impact of the tower and the tower comes up, and I just say, you know what? That's okay. It's
mhm,
going to be okay because things are like this for a reason.
mhm,
And you can get through it. So it can, yeah, brace for impact, but also it's like you're already in it, babe. You're gonna get through this, but this is a very necessary stripping down of, everything you thought,
mhm,
everything you assumed, everything you tied yourself to, and ultimately you're freeing yourself
mhm. This is the
again.
phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yep.
But in order to do
Yep. This is
that,
the ashes part of it.
this
This
is
is
the
the
ashes
ashes
part of it.
part.
Exactly.
The
But in order for
burn.
that to happen, the phoenix has to burn up. It's a challenging card. There's no
It
question about
is.
it when you're coming down to it. But coming out of the tower,
Is the
coming out of
star.
that moment of catastrophic change and breaking down everything that you thought you knew, you come into the star.
Yep. So the tower is number 16 and the star is number 17 in the
Hmm.
major arcana. And the star is everything that is left after that is true. The truest essence of what is left once the tower comes crumbling down. So if the tower is the ego and you going through an ego death and you lose a sense of identity because you had this career, for example, you have this career and you were always seen as this high powered career, blah blah blah, and you lost your job and you're shifting gears. Um, the star is the truest essence of what's left. Your skill set, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, who you are, your authentic self. And it's not all what you have to do with that. The star is just pure essence of who you are shining through. It is the regrowth of the phoenix. It is the rebirth of the phoenix once the phoenix is burned. It is knowing that there is something that perseveres.
Hmm.
It's the star is to me, it's part of our humanity.
Hmm. I tend to think of two different mixed metaphors, pop culture references, when I think of this. The first one is we're all made of stardust,
Mm,
in that sense that everything that we exist as on this plane of existence is made out of the same composite material as stars. So we are all made of stars, are all made of stardust. And from that movie, Stardust, what do stars do? They shine.
right.
So we all have our own internal magic. And that magic that essence of ourselves, when we become our own star, shines through. And that takes you and opens you up and lets you become who you are truly meant to be. You become your authentic self.
And I like that. I think it's like the light at the end of the tunnel, like you're saying, it shines, right?
Hmm.
Because you're tumbling through like, what is justice? And then, you're experiencing these dark characters, this darkness as in like the death, and then, trying to temper that with, and then you get the devil and the tower, and it's like all of this snowballing effect where things get really, really intense, and then all of a sudden, boom, ah, you've got the light of the star guiding you home,
Hmm.
you know? That's how, I mean, our ancestors navigated by
Hmm.
the stars.
By the stars.
That's how they knew where they were going. So the star is a very powerful. However, it doesn't mean that we're at the end.
No,
It may be at the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not out of the tunnel because after the star comes wah, wah, wah,
the moon, number
the
18 for
moon,
the
number
moon.
18. And the
And
moon is more like, even though like moon itself is illuminated, it's not a light card. It
no.
is one of the more shadowy dark cards, because even though the moon is an illumination, it is technically a reflection of the sun's light.
Hmm.
And so it falls, I think it's very interesting that it falls between the star and the sun in
Hmm.
the major arcana.
Right. Like I said, it's that reflection. So with that idea of something bouncing back, it's that shadow aspect of ourselves. It's understanding that there's still mystery. We are this newborn
Yep.
star. We have this new energy coming forward, but there's still a lot that's beyond our comprehension. We've learned a lot.
Hmm.
We're now beginning anew. And now we're trying to see and understand the stuff that we missed before because we built that tower. We must have missed something. The moon is that really trying to understand what we had hidden before that took us down that previous path. So it's diving deep into
Hmm.
yourself, into your intuition, into that reflection
Back
and
into the
taking,
mysteries.
yeah, back into the mystery.
And the thing that's important about the moon is she will highlight your fears.
Hmm.
She will highlight the dark.
Hmm.
She will require you that you do shadow work.
Hmm.
And one of the phrases that comes to mind for me is it's always darkest before the dawn.
Hmm.
And so this, I believe that the star and the moon work in tangent to really let you sort out through the rubble of the tower.
Hmm.
And despite what is scary, you've been through the worst, right? You've
Hmm.
already fallen from that tower. This is a call to face your fears and to know that you can make it through the darkness of the tunnel because
Hmm.
there are lights waiting for us on the other side. That we will make it through the darkest night of the soul again and again and again. We will make it through winter for another spring.
Hmm.
Now, will everybody? Not everybody, but on a whole, as a society, we do make it through these darkest times.
Hmm.
Um, Somehow learning something from the process and hopefully building a better way forward, from all of this darkness. So it's very informative of being able to unpack some of those deep depths still, knowing that that's still work that we have left to do.
Hmm. And I like what you said that is, again, that old saying that it's always darkest before the dawn, because we go from that darkness
To
into number
ta-da,
19, which would be
the
the sun.
sun.
The
Yes,
sun.
our illuminator, our solar system star, because the
Hmm.
sun is a star. But it's bringing the light back,
Hmm.
bringing the energy back, bringing, all of a sudden, all these things that we were so afraid of that don't look scary anymore because
Hmm.
in the light of day, it's this, it's just a plant. It's not this giant shadow of a tree.
Hmm.
It's just a plant.
Hmm.
There's
It's,
nothing to be afraid of here.
yeah, you finally understand the lessons you've learned. You've got that joy of satisfaction of realizing I made it through. Hey, like you said, that tree that wasn't a monster, that was a tree. Now you've
Yeah.
got warmth and radiance and success, and you are finally making progress into
Yep.
being on your way to healing, to being who you are. and you're getting to that point where you're feeling life's feeling good again. Now
And you're
you come
letting
through,
it.
and exactly,
You're
you're
letting the
letting it
good
feel good.
things in. And you can let the good things, and you can celebrate your successes.
Hmm.
And you can feel good about yourself. A lot of people have been taught to be self-critical of themselves to the point where we become our own worst critics and we think worse of ourselves than anybody who loves us
Hmm.
ever thinks of ourselves. And the sun comes in and says, you get to love yourself. You get to
Hmm.
love being yourself. You get to love life and you get to like bask in the glory of this whole thing called life because you've experienced death. You've
Hmm.
experienced ego death. You've experienced self-destruction. You've experienced injustice. You've experienced justice. Like think of all of these things that the fool has encountered on their grand journey. And is it all for naught or is it for a reason? And I think the sun is here to show you that like there are fruits of our labors. There
Hmm.
are good things to come. There are reasons to love being alive and to celebrate,
Hmm.
what makes life worth living.
Exactly. The rare occasion when everything seems right with life and you understand. Now, again, rare occasion because again, everything cycles. But
Yep,
this
it's
is this
all
movement forward. You
temporary.
totally understand and you're feeling good. Which then takes us, interestingly enough, into number 20, which is
Judgment.
so you mean we're feeling good and now we're going to go get judged. Great.
Eek, not necessarily. Isn't there like
Exactly. It's not
some Christian
necessarily.
saying, judge not yet?
Yes, ye be judged yourselves.
See, thank you. I didn't grow up with
Mhm.
the. But judgment, there's so much, again, judgment and justice to me, they are really deep wells of thought experiments, like
Mhm.
judgment. We were just talking about being our worst critic and like
Mhm.
laying off that, because we judge ourselves and we judge other people and we judge situations. And then we feel judged in certain circumstances.
And we try to always
Um,
tend to put a negative connotation and spin to it, and that's not what it is
mm-mm.
at all.
Discernment is important.
Hmm.
But also it's to me, I also think about like the Egyptian mythology of the feather and the heart that gets
Hmm.
weighed, the truth, your heart gets weighed against the feather of truth.
Hmm.
And your heart has to be lighter than the feather in
Hmm.
order to ascend into the heavens or whatever, the afterlife. And whatever is heavy in I always think about the separation of the spirit from the gross material of the body, and that gets fed back to the earth, back to Amut. And I think judgment often is shown as like a resurrection, as a rising from, again, once again, that's the rising from the ashes. But this
Hmm.
is like a very ultimate, like, freeing yourself from the baggage of this whole journey that you've been
Hmm.
on, and now you no longer need the baggage.
Hmm.
um,
Exactly. That reflection and awakening and all those past trauma, all that trauma you've held on to so tightly, judgment lets you let it go.
yep.
You can now find your peace in letting all of that stuff that held you back go. And that is that judgment you've dealt with it. Now your reward is to let it go and move forward and have that
Raising your
freedom.
vibrations.
Yeah, raise your vibrations, that freedom from everything that's held you back before. It's not there anymore. And judgment allows for that
Yep.
reflection, awakening, and that reckoning to let you let go.
Yep. And then we come to, because you would think, that we've had enough. We're at 20, right? This is the completion, right? But no, we have one more. One more card for the Major Arcana, and that is 21, and it is the World card. And this is for the Major Arcana. This card is the card that represents the true completion of the journey of the
Hmm.
cycle. You have been to hell and back. You
Twice.
have made it right. And again, this is a card that gives you a very broad perspective. It's not even on the wheel anymore. It's looking at the wheel from above.
Hmm.
the entire, like just looking at the whole world of it all. But it also just brings like this feeling of completion, fulfillment, harmony, the end of an era, the for better or worse, everything must come to an end,
Hmm.
but the world card is really just being able to look at the microcosm and the macrocosm in one and seeing how they reflect each other and, how they progress with one another and stuff.
Hmm. I
It's a
fully
big
agree.
picture.
It's the big picture. And I tend to look at this one as the world card, but I also see it as the universe, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that you've ascended to the point where you've gone through judgment, you've let everything go, and now you have ascended to the highest point. And like you said, you can now look down and see the microcosm in the macrocosm. You can now see the wheel of fortune turning. You can see everything that you went through. But at the same time, you're now back out as a being of energy and spirit, or that idea of spirit and
Yeah.
energy, and now you come back and start the cycle over again. Now you are at
Yeah. Are
that
you going to
point where
be
you
reborn?
become, now you get to be reborn into the fool all over again and start the
Would you
cycle
do it
all
again?
over.
Would you do
Yeah.
it again?
I believe I have. Honestly, I've learned something
I,
new each time around. But no,
yeah.
it's that idea of, it is the true ending, but the ending is only beginning, as we've learned
Yeah.
before.
Yep.
Death
Yep.
always breeds creation, and life begins again in some way, shape, or form. There is no
And
true ending.
I guess so in a way then that the world represents the macrocosm and the fool, the microcosm
Hmm.
too. So,
Exactly.
you know, and the fool becomes the ascendant
Hmm.
master, right? By the end of it all. Only to be humbled and,
Real
to start
and
again,
yeah, only for the master to realize that there's more to learn and become the fool all over again.
right? So then we repeat the cycles.
Hmm.
So that is our two parts of the major arcana, which is
Right. I do want to
half.
add one more thing. Now, we've gone through, this is the major. Now, different decks will also add, we've talked about in the beginning of the last episode, is there are, because everything that's relating to tarot is seen through our own lens, and artists have unique perspectives. Oftentimes, as artists are creating their own decks and their own interpretations, they will add new cards
Hmm.
and add cards that are outside of the traditional tarot, and that's where you'll see them. So we're not going to go into those cards because those are all unique to the particular decks. But should you come across a deck that has a card that's outside of this, the first one I think of is the Numinous in the Numinous Tarot. It's outside of that range, but it has its own meaning filtered through the lens and the meaning of that deck. So
Hmm.
pay attention to those cards too. So if you come across a deck that has additional cards, those also bring a different perspective, believe it or not,
Yep.
than everything we've gone through just a minute ago.
Right.
So
Right.
there
Yep.
is
So the
still
tarot,
more to learn, always.
there is always more to learn. The tarot is just a guideline. They're more like
Hmm.
guidelines, really,
Yes.
and everybody is going to have their own relationship to it. So
Hmm.
it's almost like its own living, breathing, morphing.
Hmm.
It's a living language, I guess, is a
Yes.
way to put it. It's a living language, and it changes and morphs, and it can be there can be additions made and new wisdom extrapolated from it,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's a magic. And really we've only gone through, well, I would say half, but it's not really even half. It's less
Mm-mm.
than half. But
Nope. We
it
got a
is,
lot more to go.
yes. This was just the major arcana. It
Hmm.
was 22 cards. And then there's the minor arcana. And with the major arcana, as we've spoken to at the beginning of at least the first episode, it's the big mysteries. It's the big changes that we go through it, multiple times through our journey of life, while the minor arcana are kind of like, I don't know, the little details of information that helps us to pay attention to as we go along. They're the little pebbles of wisdom that we pick up along the way. And so if you stay tuned, we will soon be unpacking our experiences with the minor arcana and sometimes as well as our approaches to
Hmm.
how we read all of these cards and remember all of them because
Yes.
it isn't always about memorization.
Hmm. Exactly.
It's about
So,
building a relationship with them.
mhm.
Yeah. So,
So let us know what you've heard and what you think about the second half of the Major Arcana.
yep.
And yeah, we'd love to hear from your thoughts. And do you read any of these cards differently than we do?
Yeah, what are your additions that you would make, or what are your go-to interpretations for any particular card? Or even tell us what decks that you prefer to
Hmm.
use, because everybody is going to have their own approach to picking up a deck and
Hmm.
choosing a deck and building a relationship to the deck itself. So, what's your favorite experiences with tarot? I would love to hear. And, with all that said, I just want to say thank you for listening to the Queer Witch Project. And if you like what you've heard, don't forget to give us some thumbs up and subscribe and follow and alarms on and, 5 stars or whatever interaction you feel like giving us because you've enjoyed your time with us. So we appreciate it.
And if there is a topic you want to know more about or an episode topic you'd like to suggest, please contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with the handle at Queer Witch Project. We upload every other week. And remember, queerness is a key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously. Bye.
Bye!